Hello, people. Today I have just some quick thoughts to share. So I was listening to Rakita's stream today. He had a friend on, and they were discussing how churches were being closed down because they're deemed non-essential, and how this is a horrible thing to do because it's taking away and infringing upon our rights as Americans. And, largely he is correct. And this is a sentiment that we've seen kind of as a developing theme, is that as the virus spreads through America and the government asks people, well, it doesn't ask so much as demands them to take certain measures, many of which are reasonable, but I think it's the indignity of being forced to do it is where people are having an issue with it. And one thing that Rakita kept kept stressing, was that he's not saying that the churches necessarily should be open, but that they should be allowed to open, right? And that a lot of these measures should be taken on voluntarily. And this is largely the the answer that libertarians, even anarcho-capitalists, would have to a situation like this. People say, without government, how could you possibly address this issue? But the problem that I keep running into is that really nothing the government's doing right now represents such a dramatic change from the norm. We have so many laws on the books that are already horrible, unconstitutional violations. And this idea, that all these Americans are saying, oh, I'm afraid that the government's going to take away these freedoms temporarily, quote unquote, and then just never give the freedoms back. And they understand this because they understand that there's a historical precedent for that. The problem is that there's also a historical precedent for the fact that you've recognized this as a problem not mattering at all. Because all of the people who are complaining about their freedoms being lost, you don't matter to the government, and you never did. And right now, I think a lot of people, they're going to be happy to take their Trump neat bucks. And the government has given us this money in the same bill that they bribe their cronyist constituents with trillions of dollars, and hand you like a tiny pitiful amount of that. And this is a celebrated thing that they've done some sort of action, and they're doing this in such a flamboyant and obviously just insulting way. The idea that they care at all about your freedoms, and that they think that you're any kind of a threat to them, is preposterous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is why I say America is a communist shithole. America is not a free country. America was never a free country at any point in my lifetime. And when I say that, people get so angry. They say, how dare you? How dare you say that about the freest, most capitalist country in the world? Well, the reason I can say that is because I actually value freedom, so I can recognize when we don't have it. And you're not doing us any favors by pretending that things were fine before the virus. And that this somehow represents some egregious new overstep. I had a friend share this post on Facebook, and I'm just going to read it because it's well written in its specificity. He wrote, "How can we alleviate the supply shortages in healthcare resources and allow providers to better prepare for future crises? We can start by relaxing or repealing the following laws and regulations: Certificate of Need laws, restrictions on telemedicine, restrictions on scope of practice, occupational licensing laws, regulations on drug development, regulations on diagnostic testing kits, restrictions on pharmacist testing and prescribing, mandatory pharmacist-pharmacy tech staffing ratios, permitting for manufacturing of medical equipment, immigration restrictions for medical talent, prohibitions on price gouging, tariffs and other trade restrictions, intellectual property protections. Every one of these laws and regulations creates barriers to market entry, protecting industry incumbents from new competition. Every one of them restricts supply, increases costs, and stifles innovation. Every one of them contributes to the shortages in healthcare resources at the local, state, and national levels that are endangering human lives right now. And, normally this is something I'd say in much fewer words. I would just say, yeah, government regulations covers virtually all of that. That when I say regulation, it covers every single thing he's listed here. And I generally don't care to look into these specifics because it's depressing. Because everything he's saying about these is true, and we know it's true. But the thing is that it's not true just now. It has been true for years, for as long as these laws have existed. The cost of these laws is human life. I made a video comparing the FDA and its regulations to Hitler, and I argue that far more people have been murdered due to these government regulations, than any genocide you can name. So I think it's a very fair comparison. And frankly, I see the SJWs, they're perfectly willing to call anybody who perpetuates the capitalist systems, anybody who defends the idea that people should be entitled to property. If you support any kind of property rights, then you're deemed an unperson, right? And then they're fine using that kind of language. And frankly, I'm sick of, being on the side of people who aren't willing to indulge in that kind of dehumanizing language, because frankly, they deserve it. Every single person to the left of a minarchist libertarian, they piss me off. I can't stand them. They're fucking murderers. I have nothing good to say for them. And I'm especially sick of conservatives because they seem to recognize in principle that these government regulations are bad, that they're not good, yet they're willing to do any deal with the devil. They're willing to take any shit compromise. And then when you look at the way the Overton window shifts to the left year after year, that Republicans they're fine to have just less of what the left promises. People who, in principle, know better. Americans love to make this big stink over, oh, we have our guns, come and take it, fuck you. You know what the government's going to say? They're going to say, okay. They're going to say, okay, they're going to kill you, they're going to take your gun over your dead body, literally. And that's that. That's the reality of the situation. I guess I'm kind of done caring about America at this point. Because America doesn't have the kind of people and the kind of culture that would be able to voluntarily address a crisis like this. For over 100 years, Americans have been telling their politicians and have been rewarding their politicians with votes and with donations for taking their freedoms away. They've been telling them again and again, we are idiots. We are overgrown, retarded children. We need you to take care of us. That has been the prevailing dominant voice of Americans for over a century now. So now, when the virus shows up and the government treats you like the overgrown, retarded children that you've been telling the government that you are, you whine and complain and cry about being grounded. So, fuck you. I honestly don't care what the government does to Americans at this point. What virtue is there left in Americans on average at this point? The ones who love freedom and liberty, the majority of them still think taxation is necessary. They aren't doing anything to fight any of these laws. They aren't doing anything to make us more free. So what hope is there? What hope is there? I think maybe we just have to accept the fact that, yep, government is necessary. The people are a bunch of fucking retards, and they're going to get what they deserve, and I'm not going to waste any energy feeling bad for people who are, frankly, a bunch of backstabbing fucking Judases who sold me out, who sold out anyone in America that I care about, who just took all of our freedoms away, and they're only sorry about it the moment that it inconveniences them in the slightest, because you had to stay home and eat some canned food for a few weeks. Like, boo fucking who. Alright, that's all I had to say about this.